Today we've got a great malicious compliance story against a supervisor who was extremely annoying. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, you want to make sure everything is in the bag? No problem. For context, I work as a baker at a restaurant chain that's popular for their French food and pastries, both breakfast and lunch and dinner, all day. Now, being in the bakery not only requires me to handle pastry and coffee orders, but also to-go and mobile orders. Since I perform both of these roles, there's usually a good bit of side work for me to do throughout my shift. So even if it's technically not busy, I'm still working and doing something. On the flip side, whenever it gets busy, either from orders piling up or just a large influx of people, I have to put all of that on hold to help customers and my coworkers. To add to that, the amount of time it takes to complete your average order is anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. Longer depending on how many customers I have to deal with. You probably read this paragraph and thought, makes sense, this is pretty obvious. And you're right, it is obvious. Or so I thought. Around 6 to 6:30 is when the dinner rush comes in full force, not ceasing until around 7:30 to 8. The dining room usually doesn't fill up on Thursday nights, but to-go orders pull a smash mouth and don't stop coming for a while, usually leaving me with 3 to 5 orders at a time on a good night. A little after 6, an older couple comes in to place a to-go order, and while I didn't see them at first, preoccupied finishing up a small order, the lady, without even calling out for me, says that she and her husband are going to look at some items on the service line. Hot plate items, salads, soups, and we'll be back to order. I was taken aback by her manner, missing half of what she said as I turned around, but didn't think much of it at the time. She comes back to order a mix of line items and pastries, warning me that everything must be in her bag and that she will check it when it comes out. All in all, it should have taken me about 10 minutes max to get it out, and so I told her it would likely be around 10 minutes. She again is adamant that I do not miss anything and tells me she'll give me her change from the bill as a tip if I do a good job, with a little grin following it up. Because $2 in moist dog-eared bills is such a great incentive to do a good job, I've given her no reason to think I'd forget any items. I even read back her items and double-checked some of them to make sure it was all correct, and she still had to insist that I do a good job. Sure, no problem. It'll all be there. Cue malicious compliance. Before they came in, I had 3 or 4 orders I was working on as well as a small side task. But within the next 5 minutes, I had 7 orders lined up, more en route, and I was getting backed up helping customers and waiting on items from the kitchen. I'm running all over the bakery, taking, making, and bagging orders, and just trying to hop from one thing to the next while being efficient. Older couple still had 3 orders before theirs, and since 2 of them were DoorDash and Uber orders, I prioritized those so that the drivers can make their money. I had started working on older couple's order, but still had to take care of the people before them as well as incoming orders, and in order to make sure everything was accounted for, 10 minutes easily turned into 15 minutes. Speaking of what's obvious, it was also obvious to see that I was working my butt off and doing everything I could to get food out to people. Most customers, when seeing this, and while also being surrounded by other waiting customers, are patient enough to wait an extra 5 to 10 minutes when it gets busy like that, knowing that if it's out late, it'll still be the correct order, as I'm meticulous. The lady from the older couple, on the other hand, can't be bothered to wait more than 15 minutes, and once it gets to 15 minutes, she comes up asking what's taking so long, stating that they're in a hurry, while I'm of course moving at a very leisurely pace, no worries or a care in the world. Thankfully, my manager was the one who conversed with her, because at this point I wouldn't have been able to stop my smart mouth from going off. Manager tells her it'll be a few more minutes before it's finished, and that we'll have it out as soon as possible, which was apparently not allowed because she got upset and told my manager, if my order isn't out in the next 2 minutes, I want a refund. No way she can get a refund for an order she hasn't even received yet, especially having only ordered it 15 minutes prior at dinner time, and my manager tells her so. Now, although he said it would be a few more minutes, it ends up being about 25 minutes total that they have to wait for their order. Other orders took up a large part of that 25 minutes, but I also wanted to make absolutely sure that everything was in her bag. Every extra sauce and individual item down to the most minute detail. I double, triple, and quadruple checked to make sure everything was there as she desired, made sure she had utensils, threw in some napkins, stapled the ticket to the bag nice and neatly, and when I called out the older couple's order, she came and got it without a word and left just the same. Didn't get the tip, but she got all of her food, and I got a good chuckle. Time and time again, a principle I just practice and preach is don't mess with the people that are handling your food, especially if you want it in a timely manner. I just can't imagine going into a place, being a total jerk, and then standing there knowing that behind the scenes where you can't see, they're handling all that food that you're expecting to come out. I'm not saying that people would do anything bad, but it's also wishful thinking if you think it doesn't happen. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you enjoy awesome stories of malicious compliance, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? That said, our next story is Toggle the Bathroom Sign, the pettiest of compliance. I, male, work in a small building where, of 20 employees, there are 3 other men. The men's room has 4 urinals and 3 stalls, plenty of room for everyone if needed. There's also a unisex executive bathroom. 2 of the other men are executives, CEO, CFO. As part of the COVID protocols, every bathroom had vacant/occupied toggle signs installed. They're on the bathroom door to the whole bathroom, not the stalls. It was, in 2020, an understandable measure to prevent exposure to an unknown virus in a poorly ventilated enclosed space. It's not as necessary now, especially since we're all vaxxed, and I mean there are 4 of us. Generally speaking, I don't use the toggle, it's a relic. Some combination of the other men do use the toggle, switch it to occupied on their way in, and don't change it back to vacant on their way out. Our CEO, who does not use the executive bathroom for whatever reason, is also the chief executive offender. He insists that the toggle remain due to COVID protocols. Whatever, any bathroom is 95% never in use, so I go in anyway, ignoring the sign. Last week, the CEO denied a request to move to more work-from-home days over the summer, a period of lighter workload. I'll live, but it's annoying. This week, a sign showed up inside the bathroom saying, "Make sure to flip the sign," more or less. Meaning that not only are the signs still up, but the CEO wants their use enforced for COVID reasons. And we can't work from home. Here's the malicious compliance. I am now using the sign. Every time I've gone in the bathroom, I toggle it from occupied to vacant and toggle it back to occupied when I leave. I hope it makes our CEO wait a few extra minutes with a full bladder. Bonus for r/petty revenge overlap. If the executives aren't going to use their private bathroom, I am. I had a nice long sit-down session this afternoon. It just seems like nowadays, almost nobody is wearing masks anymore. Don't get me wrong, the virus is still very heavily spreading around, but I think it's pretty overkill to insist that only one person should be able to use this bathroom. That said, always do your business when you can on company time, because there's nothing more satisfying than knowing that they're paying you to take a load off. Our next story is follow the teacher's instructions. This happened decades ago when I was in school. I just remembered it for some reason and figured I would share. It's pretty tame compared to most of the stories on here. I was in middle school, and all of us kids were being noisy kids talking between classes. A teacher who had the next class started teaching, but the kids would not stop chatting. So our teacher turned around and said, "Whoever wants to talk to each other can go out in the hallway and talk." Cue malicious compliance. Everyone looked at each other for 2 seconds contemplating this choice. 2 to 3 people walked out at first, and that was how the avalanche started. Almost everyone, 80% of the class at least, went out into the hallway and started chatting loudly until the headmaster came out to see why there were loud kids in the hallway when they were supposed to be in classes. This was one of the rare moments when the jocks and nerds and everyone else stuck together, and they all told the headmaster word for word what the teacher had said. The headmaster marched us all back in class silently, had a quick chat with the teacher for a minute, just hushed whispers, and pretty much nothing got covered in the lesson that day due to all the commotion. Be careful what you wish for. Not gonna lie, growing up, I don't think I was ever in a class that would have been so willingly collaborative in this way. The closest I ever had was a teacher who loved to, before class really began, would stand up at this podium, hold his cup of coffee in his hand and just chat about stuff. Mostly things they liked, like water skiing and bands that they liked. You could get him to probably ramble almost the entire class if you kept hitting the right subjects. And it just seemed like our class had continuously worked together to try to find the right questions to just keep him going. I cannot tell you how much he loved to talk about how lucky he was to see the Ramones in person. That said, our next story is, she can't do it right? Okay then, you take over. This happened a few years ago, but it still makes me chuckle. I was helping an activist group create arm locks. The way we did this is by cutting down some 6-inch diameter PVC pipes to around 2.5 feet before wrapping them in chicken wire and plaster bandages. Then the activists would handcuff their wrists together inside the arm lock so they could occupy a building for longer while cops found ways to destroy the arm locks without hurting the activists. So, as with any mission like this, the crew putting together everything is a motley one, many ages, races, and varying skill levels. Now, I feel like it's germane to the story to mention I'm trans. But at this time, I was for sure perceived as a woman. I was sort of directing folks on how to complete the project, and 2 women and I were cutting these PVC pipes with a hacksaw and a tree saw. We'd been at it for a couple of hours. It was slow going. We didn't have the proper tools and we're all taking turns cutting because it was hard work with the crap tools we had. One of the people who had supplied some of the tools was a middle-aged white man I'll call Jim. He arrived after work, was well underway, but as he stood watching, he couldn't stop commenting on the job one of the women was doing, using his crappy old tree saw on thick PVC. If you've ever tried to cut PVC with a hand saw, then you know the blade sticks. It is frustrating. It's not like cutting a log. The plastic starts to get hot and it makes the saw stick, and getting it moving again takes a particular and careful effort. We were short on time. The activists would need the arm locks the next day, before dawn, to be properly prepared. So we were in a hurry and there was a sense of urgency. It was past 11 p.m. already. So my friend is cutting and Jim keeps commenting on how she's doing it wrong, how she needs to move the blade faster, how she should angle the blade, and I'm saying stuff like, "It's harder than you think, she's doing a fine job." But Jim doesn't get the hint. He seems to think that because we're using one of his saws, he's the supervisor on this job now. He's getting on my nerves, something fierce. It bothers me a lot because all my life, men have been backseat drivers while I competently handle my business. It will come as no shock to anyone that since I've grown a beard, this doesn't happen to me anymore. I start getting angrier and angrier. It's degrading to my friend, and most importantly, it's not helping. It's only making her job harder. Finally, I say, "Okay, Jim, since you think you can do such a great job, why don't you go ahead and take over?" Jim grabs the saw and starts vigorously cutting the pipe, and immediately breaks his own saw in half. Yes, we were down a tool, maybe even 2, because I don't recall Jim sticking around after that. But I can't remember ever being so amused. I still laugh about it. I'm laughing about it right now. Thanks, Jim. When it comes to tools, I guess it takes one to know one. Honestly, I think anybody worth their salt in this field, or anybody that has this handsaw or has experience with it, would understand that it's a daunting task to use a basic old handsaw to cut a PVC pipe. I mean, shoot, the last time I used a handsaw on just regular wood, it was way more work than I remember. Our next story is returns only in original packaging? Alright then. So I go into the local big chain hardware store just to do the usual wander around that guys like to do when I see that they have a great sale on a miter saw/stand combination. Since this is something I've had my eyes on for a while, I make the purchase and happily head home to set it up. I get home, haul the boxes out of the car, take everything out of the boxes, crunch up the boxes and put them in the recycling bin, put all the packing materials in the trash, and start the assembly. The saw just took a couple steps. Everything was great, so I moved to the stand, get it all put together, and then go out to put the saw on the stand, and I noticed that one of the attachment clamps is broken. So I get in the car and head back to the store to see if they can replace it. No, I'm told, I'll need to return the entire purchase in the original packaging for replacement. Wouldn't it be easier, I ask, to simply go into one of these boxes here and swap out the clamp, rather than make me go home, disassemble everything, try to recreate the packaging and haul everything back in? Of course not, that would make too much sense. I ask exactly what their return policy is, and I'm told 30 days with receipt in original packaging. So I do what any self-respecting guy would do. I buy another saw and stand combination. Right on the other side of the checkout in full view of management, I open the box, reach in, grab a functional clamp, replace it with the broken one, making sure to put it back into the original little plastic bag that it came in, and head over to customer service to make a return. I'm not gonna lie, having heard this story, I don't know if I would have had the brains to just be able to make that switch real quick. I think it's one of those things that's so obvious yet would easily slip your mind. I think it was pretty quick thinking. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another awesome malicious compliance story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.